Hello and welcome to the second module in our Spring Security series. This module is going to be concentrating on how to work with web services, in particular, how to use the industry standard OAuth to allow two web services to work together securely. By the end of this module, you will have implemented OAuth on both sides. You will have written a client application that is able to contact a third-party website. And by sending a REST request, you will be able to securely access the resources on that third-party website. And of course, you will have also implemented the third-party website itself. As always, I will be explaining every step along the way. OAuth is not the easiest thing to work with, so we will be building this solution step by step through the course, and I hope that everything will be clear and understandable. In this opening chapter, we're going to get some sample code up and running. To start off, I'm giving you two websites with some very basic features, and through this course, we will be adding the security. You'll find the code that you need in the starting workspace folder, which you can get from the zip download on the web page for this course. Usually on a virtual pair programmers course, I say that I only recommend you use this code, and if you have your own version of the code, then you can work with that. But seriously, this course is probably, well, definitely the hardest that we've ever done at virtual pair programmers. There are lots of traps along the way. And for this reason, I'm insisting that you start with exactly the same code as me. Then once you've finished the course, of course, you can go ahead and implement OAuth on your own code. So as I said, there are two websites on this course, and the first one is in the project here, and this, remember, is in the starting workspace that you will have unzipped from the download. And this one is called the CRM system. Now, if you've done some of our other courses, you will be familiar with this. It's a very basic customer relationship management system. It does some other things, but the main thing it does is keep a list of customers. We first used this project on our 2008 Spring Fundamentals course, and then we used the same system when we re-recorded that course in 2014. But importantly, we also used that system on the Spring REST Web Services course. So inside here, we've got a good working REST service already implemented. Now, as I say, I just want to repeat this one more time. If you've been on a previous course, you might have a version of this CRM system, but I still want you to use the one that we have here because I have made some changes. They're very slight changes just to make this course easier. And I'm going to be talking about what those changes are in just a few moments. Please use this version. Well, the idea of OAuth is that third-party websites or web services can securely access some or all of the resources exposed by this system. So, of course, we need another website for this course, and that's where this MailMonkey folder comes in. This is a site which allows customers to set up mailing lists and to send newsletters to customers. And you can probably guess where we're going with this. The ultimate aim on this course is I would like the MailMonkey system to be able to access some or all of the resources in the CRM system, and we need to do that in a secure way. So that's all for later, but the first job for this course is to get these two sites up and running. So make sure you've extracted the CRM system, MailMonkey, and the REST client folder, and the Tomcat folder, and the bat file you can see here. Make sure they're all extracted into your starting workspace. So when you start up Eclipse, the workspace that you're using will be the folder containing all of those projects. If you've done a virtual pair programmers course before, then you'll be familiar with the next few steps, but I'm going to go through them just in case. At first, Eclipse won't recognize your projects, and what we need to do is just create a new, through the file menu, Java project. And then we need for the project name exactly the same name as the folder. So one of them was CRM system, and notice that that is case sensitive. And as soon as you type the last character here, you'll see here that you get an info pop-up basically saying that Eclipse is going to automatically configure the project. And what you should see is that you get some warnings. They're nothing to worry about, but you shouldn't see any compile errors. If you do, then it's possible that for some reason Eclipse hasn't picked up the jar files, which you will find in the lib directory. You could try selecting all of the jar files, right-click, build path, and you would get add to build path here if there were any that were not on the build path. Apart from that, as long as you're using a modern Java development kit, I'm using Java 8 here, but I think this should work fine on definitely Java 7 and possibly even Java 6. So that's the CRM system opened, and we just need to repeat the process now for the Mail Monkey project. Again, must be spelt correctly with a space and capital letters for mail and monkey. And again, we should see no compile errors once that's been opened. And there was one other project which we will need quite soon. That project is called REST Client. The other thing we will need to do is run the server for the course. And as usual, we're going to use Tomcat. For a Windows system, it should be a simple case of running this bat file. And you're looking for some logging that looks something like this. The important thing to check for is we don't want to see any exceptions appearing in this log. The most common problem here, I would say, based on our support calls, is if you've already got some kind of a web server running in the background and you're trying to run on the same port. So if that's the case, then just make sure that you have closed down any other servers that you happen to be running on your computer. If you're using a Macintosh or Linux or Unix-based system, then I can't demonstrate this because I am recording on Windows. Unfortunately, we don't have screen recording software for Linux or Mac. But in that case, it would be a case of just popping up a terminal window, navigate into the Tomcat directory and then the bin directory, and then you want to run the command sh startup.sh. And then, so that you can see the logging, it's worthwhile running a tail command on the Tomcat log. You're looking for something like tail-f and then the Tomcat logs directory, and the file is catalina.out. And you should see then in your terminal window output similar to this. Well, I'm sorry if you've already been on a virtual pair programmers course. That was quite tedious for you, I imagine. And I realise that this is a very basic way of running a development, but it's important to us to make sure that really everybody is doing exactly the same thing on the videos so that we don't get distracted by any silly problems caused by unimportant things. Okay then, well, the next job is to deploy our system. Now, this is the first major change I've made. Even if you've already built the CRM system on other courses, I have made a slight tweak to the build.xml file. The first obvious thing is that I've renamed the war file to crm.war. I think we called it My Web App on previous courses, but it's really important on this course that we distinguish the two websites. So you'll always know whether we're talking about CRM or if I go into the build script for MailMonkey, you can see there that I'm calling the war file MailMonkey. The other big change that I've made is that I've linked these two build scripts together. In rehearsing for this course, I have lost count of the number of times I've made a change to one of the systems and then I've gone and run the wrong build file. And I'm wondering why my changes haven't made any effect. So what you'll find is if I just run either of these build scripts, let's go for the CRM system and run as ant build. Now that did flash past quite quickly. I have a minor problem here with my compiler configuration. It's complaining about version numbers there. I'm really not worried about that at all. What's important is, although I ran the CRM build, it did in fact run the other build as well. You can see here it's deploying mailmonkey.war, and if I go a little higher, it also deployed crm.war. So as long as there are no compile errors in your project, just run either of the build scripts and it will deploy both applications. So that should solve a few problems. It's a common problem on our courses at this point. If you ran the build script and got an error saying that the compiler could not be found, then what you need to do for your project is go to Window, Preferences. On a Mac, that would be the Apple menu and Preferences. And then under the Java tab, expand, installed JREs, and then you need to go through the process of clicking on Add here, then find a standard virtual machine, and on the button here, you now need to browse to wherever you have installed your Java JDK, which will be under Program Files, and then Java, and then find a recent version of the JDK. And of course, the location of this will be different if you're on a Macintosh. And then you can click Finish and switch the JRE to the new one that you've just installed. And then you should find that Ant will run correctly. Now, I didn't need to do that on this setup. It seems to depend on the version of Java, but for me, the build is running okay. So all is well, and I hope it is for you too. We need to test that the two websites have deployed correctly. And if you check your Tomcat log, you should see in there a reference to deploying web application MailMonkey, and you should also see somewhere deploying web application crm.war. And you're looking here for no exceptions. There is some minor logging here. It's not happy that I've accidentally included a jar file. The servlet API.jar file is not needed by Tomcat, so it's been rejected. That's really not important. If you see an exception here, then you've got a serious problem. I promise you we are going to have hundreds of exceptions through the progress of this course. But for now, that looks okay, and we can now check in a browser. Now, another change that I've made to the CRM system is I've changed the URLs. I've changed them to be absolutely clear as to whether we're currently running a web service or whether we're running a website. So for the CRM website, if you visit the URL localhost 8080 /CRM, of course, is the context route now for the app, I've then added onto the URL website. So here we are calling the public-facing website, and we are not calling a web service. But then the main page you're looking for is allcustomers.html. And if you visit that link, you should find you're taken to a login page. Now, one of the big problems on this course is we are going to be working on two separate web applications, and we'll constantly be going from one to the other. So it's really important to us that we're always clear which of the sites we're on. So I've made some effort here. I think on previous courses there was no styling on these pages, but I've tried to style them up to look completely different. So whenever you see the black header here, you know you're on the CRM system. Another change I've made is I've also secured this system. You will find the security config for this project under the SRC folder, and we have an XML file there, which is the CRM security config.xml. And if you check in there, you should find everything in there is just the kinds of things we've done on module 1 of this course using Spring Security to secure a URL pattern. At present, I'm just making all pages be secured, apart from the login page and the CSS pages, and we're using form-based authentication to log in. I have decided for this module not to bother with a database. We're using an in-memory authentication provider, as you can see here, and I hope that's no problem for you. If you wanted a database, then you would just plug one in, exactly as we did on Module 1. We don't want that for this course. We'll keep that out of the way. So you can work this out now. We currently only have one user. That's my username, RAC, and my password is secret. I know that some of you will be just coming straight to this module. If any of this is worrying you, then please check out Module 1, where we go to great lengths to securely hash the passwords and store them in a proper database. So that means then if I get an incorrect username and password, of course, I'm denied access. Now for this course, we're going to be constantly logging into this page. So I've taken the liberty of pre-configuring the username and password in the login box, and I'm not obscuring the password. That's just so we don't get confused. I hope it goes without saying that in a production system, we would not be doing this. So RAC and secret, and then we are now in our database of customers. So this is another minor change. I was fed up of the really basic test data that we had on the REST course. So I've added in a few more realistic looking customers. I generated this using an online test data generator. So I promise you that all of these email addresses are fake and made up. Just if you haven't done one of the previous courses, then just to show you where that data is coming from, we're running with an in-memory database here. It's called HSQLDB, and it's getting its data from this database.dat.script. And if I just have a look down there, you can see that's where the insertions are happening. Again, it will be a trivial job to switch in a real database once we've got OAuth working. Well, that's it for the CRM system. You really can't do anything else on here apart from logging out. For MailMonkey, the address you want for this is localhost 8080/mailmonkey and then /buildnewsletter.html. Now, I apologize for the design of this. I am not a web designer, and my aim here wasn't to make a nice looking page. I just wanted to make it look completely different from the CRM system. So you'll always be clear which side we're on. Looking into the MailMonkey project, again, there is a security config here, the MailMonkey security config.xml, pretty much the same as the other site. The difference here is we have a username of MM and a password of MM. I'll just test that bad username and password will fail, but a good one will take us to what is currently an empty page. And finally, we also have a REST web service as part of the CRM system. So as well as the, if you like, the customer-facing web pages, there's also a REST web service that third-party clients can access. We built this back on the Spring Remoting training course. You don't have to have done that course in order to follow this course, but it would be helpful. But just in case you haven't done that course, we'll have a quick review of how the web service works. If we check inside the source folder, there's a package in there called REST controllers. And there are a few classes in here which are used for the representations of the data. But the really important class is the customer REST controller. And the main thing I think I want to draw your attention to, if I choose one of the methods in here, this method is a method which will return all of the customers stored in the database. And check the URL mapping here. What I've done for this course, and this is a change from the previous version, is I've added the URL pattern /REST to the front of all of the REST URLs. And I've done that to make it absolutely clear whether we're calling the REST service or whether we're working on the website. So we should be able to write a client now, which will be able to access the URL pattern /REST/customers. I sometimes like to test the REST web service using a standard browser just because it's an easy way to make GET requests. Just to remind you then that the URL pattern for the website is crm/website, and I'm going to visit that link just so I have a chance to log in. But now if I try the URL pattern of /REST/customers, then I'm now getting an XML document back, which is a representation of all of the customers in the system. If you would prefer to have JSON returned back, then check out the Spring Remoting course for details of how to change the representation types. So that appears to be working. At present, we don't have proper security applied to this REST web service, so that's going to be coming up in the next chapter. It won't be very difficult to do, but it will be a good way to start the course.